Alright, so we're kicking things off at the tail end of the 19th century, which is already a bad time to even be alive without the monsters. Dr. Frankenstein, yes, that Victor Frankenstein, has been running his little reanimation science lab inside of a castle, and his whole operation is being bankrolled by none other than Count Dracula himself. And obviously, when a vampire offers to fund your dead rising research, there are strings attached. Big, fanged, blood-soaked strings attached. Dracula needs Frankenstein's research to wake up his own dead offspring because he's trying to cultivate an entire army of pure-blooded vampires. Just a normal Tuesday for this guy. However, when Frankenstein actually figures out what Dracula's end goal is, he's not about it. Then he looks out the front gate and he sees an angry mob rolling up, and he just decides. He refuses to let his work be used for this. He says no to the most powerful vampire in existence. Respect. He's got conviction. Obviously, though, Dracula, who did not get to where he is by accepting rejection, gracefully kills him for it. And this is where things get interesting, because at the exact moment that Frankenstein flatlines, lightning strikes. The monster, who is, by the way, built from the bodies of 7 different men, which is an absolutely insane piece of character design, breaks free of his restraints the second his creator hits the floor. And instead of going on a rampage, like you might expect, this massive constructed being of corpses has, and I cannot stress this enough, a surprisingly kind and loyal heart. He gathers the doctor's body, runs and carries him to a nearby windmill, hoping that he could somehow bring him back to life, but he can't. The townspeople start to surround the windmill, and they set it on fire. Dracula and his brides fly overhead and watch the entire thing burn down with the emotional warmth of somebody watching their pizza delivery get cancelled. They needed the monster for their plan, but now everything is gone. Moving on, 1 year later, Paris, a man discovers the body of a murdered girl and he tracks the killer to an abandoned building. But the culprit is not some regular person. It is Mr. Hyde, and he is enormous, an absolute unit of a monster, terrifying in strength. The kind of thing that should not exist in a city of actual humans. But his pursuer is also not a regular person. He is Van Helsing, professional monster slayer, operating in secret service to the Holy Order of the Vatican, an organization so clandestine that it does not officially exist. Armed to the teeth with specialized gadgets and what can only be described as an irrational amount of courage, Van Helsing dodges Hyde's massive attacks and ultimately sends the creature plunging off the top of a tall building. And as Hyde hits the ground, he transforms back into his human form before dying. Van Helsing pauses, says a quiet prayer for him, and he moves on. But there's just one problem with this. Because from the outside looking in, Van Helsing appears to be an assassin who murders people and then claims that they were monsters. So Van Helsing gets summoned to the Vatican. The Cardinal briefs him on a new mission, which is to travel to Transylvania in order to find the last surviving descendants of King Valerius. They are a noble family who have been fighting Dracula for centuries. The Valerius bloodline made a vow before God that no member of the family would enter heaven and they would never rest until Dracula was gone. King Valerius left behind hidden maps and torn parchments that read, in Latin, "In the name of God, open this door," so that future generations to come could finish what he started. 400 years have passed, and the Valerius family has never succeeded. King Boris vanished a year ago. His son, Prince Velkin, and his daughter, Princess Anna, are the last 2 left. If both die before Dracula is killed, 9 generations of the Valerius family are condemned to purgatory. The stakes are, essentially, cosmically catastrophic. No respawn. Wolverine is then handed that torn piece of parchment, and he notices that the symbol on it is identical to the one on his own ring. Somewhere in Transylvania, answers to his forgotten past might be waiting for him. But he doesn't know why he has the ring, he doesn't know what it is, he just knows it's relevant. His travel companion is Carl, a clever novice monk who is basically a medieval weapons engineer, fully briefed on how to destroy supernatural creatures. Carl walks Van Helsing through the armory, including a grenade that produces light as bright as the sun itself. Genuinely terrifying piece of equipment, flashbang, love it. Meanwhile, in Transylvania, a man is tied to a tree to be used as werewolf bait. However, he is perfectly calm about this, which tells you something. Turns out this was a trap for the werewolf, and it works. Using his insane core strength, he breaks free, climbs a rope, but then the mechanism jams and he's stuck midway while the werewolf closes in. This part is not going according to plan. But his sister and a group of men come rushing in, trapping the beast in a metal cage, and they start shooting. But ordinary bullets don't do anything. As it were, werewolves require silver bullets in order to kill them. And the one pistol loaded with silver is lying on the ground just out of reach. Classic. This is a skill issue of the highest order. The man is Velkin, and the sister is Anna, the two last living children of King Boris Valerius. Anna sprints for the pistol, but the werewolf breaks free of the cage and lunges directly at her. So she runs, and it chases her all the way to the edge of a cliff. But her brother arrives just in time to throw himself between them, saving her. Unfortunately, he goes over the cliff with the werewolf into the lake far below, and Anna helplessly watches from the edge. It seems that her brother is dead. Not long after, Van Helsing and Carl arrive in Transylvania, but the locals are not welcoming, and Anna makes it very clear that she does not trust strangers. But before any real conversations can happen, Dracula's three brides, Verona, Marischka, and Alira, descend upon the village. Gray-blue skin, enormous wings, fangs, strength enough to throw a cow through a wall. These are horrifying predators, and now they are after Anna. A battle erupts. The brides have the upper hand clearly, but Van Helsing is here, and every time one of them grabs Anna, he pulls her back. During the fight, the sun would briefly force the vampires to retreat, but then the clouds would come back in, and they'd attack again. Van Helsing would try fighting with a semi-automatic crossbow, but the brides are too fast for regular bolts to finish them off. Now, when one of them seizes Anna, Van Helsing dips his bolt into holy water, and he opens fire, pinning Marischka to the side of the building with a volley of blessed shots. Instantly, she dissolves into a skeleton. But the moment that Marischka dissolves, Verona and Alira, who are nowhere near, scream and convulse like they just took that direct hit. This shows that they're connected through their vampire curse. They feel everything that the others feel. Rather than continuing the fight, they transform and fly back into the castle, wailing. However, the villagers are furious, not grateful, because it turns out they had an arrangement. In order to survive, it was agreed that the vampires would come and take 1 or 2 people a month, and the villagers just grimly learned to live with this. But now that a bride is dead, the retaliation is going to be ruthless. Van Helsing has made things worse, but that is when Anna steps forward and tells everybody his name. Van Helsing, the first person to kill a vampire in over 100 years. And the crowd goes quiet. She brings him inside, explaining the centuries of torment. Anna wants to kill Dracula, and she wants to do it tonight. But Van Helsing insists they wait until dawn. But nothing is going to stop Anna, so Van Helsing has to knock her out. Waking up in the middle of the night, she finds werewolf tracks inside of her home. Her brother Velkin is alive, but he's cursed. This was deliberate. Dracula purposely unleashed the werewolf to infect a member of the Valerius family in order to bring them under his control. Velkin tries desperately to tell Anna something about Dracula's secret, but the moon pulls him back before he can speak. He transforms, tearing through his own skin as he climbs the walls, but Van Helsing arrives just in time to drive him away before anybody gets hurt. Chasing the werewolf through town, Van Helsing would run into this villager who secretly worships the beast, and so he tries to kill him, but the werewolf kills the man himself. Kinda awkward for everybody. Helsing is about to shoot Velkin, but his sister arrives in time to stop him. She tells him that there is a rumor Dracula has an antidote, a cure for the werewolf curse. If there is even a chance of saving her brother, she needs to pursue it, and Van Helsing agrees to help. They track him down by following a trail of shed fur, and Anna explains that werewolves only shed before their first full moon. After that, the transformation becomes permanent and the human mind is lost forever. Despite her brother not having crossed that line yet, time is short. The trail leads to Castle Frankenstein, where Dracula is conducting another experiment. Without the monster, and with Frankenstein dead, nothing Dracula tries actually works. His machine needs a specific living conduit to function properly, and no ordinary subject can handle the electricity required. He captured King Boris, his own distant descendant, and tried to force him through the experiment, but Boris, being a regular human meat suit without any supernatural upgrades, could not withstand the lightning, and he died on the table. Can we get an F in chat? So Dracula ends up trying to use Velkin, the logic being werewolf venom coursing through Velkin's system means that he can absorb far more power than a regular human alone. If that is enough to finally give his children lasting life, great. If not, well, Velkin's cooked either way. Moving on, Anna and Van Helsing slip inside and find a vast chamber filled with hundreds of fleshy cocoons hanging from the ceiling. Each one is a gargoyle-like bat-winged child of Dracula, waiting for the electricity that will shock them to life. With Velkin hoisted up into the tower, lightning strikes and the energy channels through him and down into the cocoons like the world's most horrifying defibrillator. The eggs hatch and Dracula's children are alive. His brides are overwhelmed with joy and immediately fly out to feed their newborns with fresh human flesh. Of course, Van Helsing isn't just going to let this happen, so he opens fire on the hatchlings, which draws Dracula's attention and gives Anna a window to try and reach her brother. The two end up confronting each other, and Van Helsing drives a silver stake into Dracula's chest, but it does nothing. He barely even flinches. But then, with genuinely eerie familiarity, he addresses Van Helsing by a name that he doesn't recognize: Gabriel. He starts talking about a shared history stretching back centuries. He describes Gabriel as somebody trained by monks and mullahs from Tibet to Istanbul, protected by Rome but hunted by everybody else. Dracula furthers that he can give Gabriel his lost memories back. But here is what Van Helsing doesn't know about himself: that he was once Gabriel, the left hand of God. He fought across 2,000 years of human history, and in 1462, he personally hunted down and killed Count Dracula. After doing so, his memories were taken from him, and he was found one day on the steps of a church with no recollection of any of it. That is arguably the most insane origin story in this entire film, and it also has a living, breathing being made of 7 corpses. Meanwhile, Anna has fought her way through Dracula's servants to reach her brother. She finds him, but unfortunately she doesn't find a cure, and what's worse is her brother is too far gone and she can't pull him back. With no options left, she retreats to rejoin Van Helsing, who is still fighting Dracula. Failing to kill him on account of Dracula already being dead, Helsing would produce a silver cross and press it into his hands. The cross melts, Dracula screams, and Helsing escapes using a grappling hook. A werewolf Velkin would chase them on the zip line, nearly killing them both, but they do manage to get free. Dracula's children would then start swarming towards the village, but for some reason they all die, popping and exploding one by one as they have in previous experiments. The machine worked long enough to hatch them, but not enough to sustain them. Seeing this, Verona and Alira would return to the castle in tears. Macula, furious, finally understands that only Frankenstein's monster is able to uniquely withstand the machine's output. He is the answer to making everything permanent. Back near the old burned windmill, Anna and Van Helsing fall through the rotted floor into a cave-like space below. In the dark, they find Frankenstein's monster. Turns out, when the villagers came to set the windmill on fire, he fell down as the structure collapsed, and he's been hiding down here ever since. A brief, violent scuffle would ensue. Van Helsing would tranquilize him, and before losing consciousness, the monster delivers a warning. He says that he alone can give Dracula's children permanent life, so he asks them to end him before Dracula can get to him. Now, Anna is down, but Van Helsing is not. He tells her that evil might have created this being, left its mark on him, but evil does not rule him. He knows the creature to be pure, to be good of heart, and he's not going to kill something that's pure of heart. In the village tower, Carl has found a compartment with an ancient painting, a prophecy. As he watches, he sees the painted figures animate, 2 men transforming, one into a vampire and another into a werewolf as they lock into battle. But he would file this away. However, during this, unknown to anybody, Velkin was watching from a cave. He has seen Frankenstein's monster, and right away, he reports back to Dracula. Van Helsing would decide to transport Frankenstein's monster to Rome for safety. 2 carriages. Van Helsing's is packed with explosives and stakes as a decoy. And later, when Verona swoops down and tears open the door expecting Frankenstein's monster to be in there, the explosion destroys her. Dracula is now forced into a monogamous relationship. However, the second carriage, carrying Frankenstein's monster, is attacked by the werewolf. In the chaos of this fight, Frankenstein's monster actually helps Van Helsing, and together they bring Velkin down. He transforms back to his human form and dies, which devastates Anna. But that's not all, because in the struggle, Velkin actually bit Van Helsing, and so now he is cursed with werewolf blood. Alira, Dracula's last remaining bride, looks for revenge, seizing Anna and carrying her off into the night, and Van Helsing can't stop it. When Frankenstein's monster, Carl, and Van Helsing all arrive in Budapest, Alira would show up. She tells them that Dracula extends an offer, the monster for Anna. Helsing agrees but picks the meeting location deliberately, a crowded place with a lot of people. He had no actual intention of handing the monster over. Sedating Frankenstein's monster and hiding him in a cemetery crypt, Carl informs Van Helsing that the werewolf transformation won't fully take hold until the next full moon. He can resist Dracula's influence until the final stroke of midnight on that night. But that's only in 2 days. Moving ahead to All Hallows Eve, the exchange happens at a grand masquerade ball. Inside, Anna is under Dracula's hypnotic control, dancing with him like a puppet. As they pass by a mirror, details become clear. Anna is the only reflection in the room, because every other guest is a vampire. The entire ballroom is a trap. Dracula is mere seconds away from biting Anna when Van Helsing swoops in and saves her. But the problem is, while everybody is focused on that, Igor finds Frankenstein's monster. He had tracked him back to the crypt, dragged him right back to Dracula's hands, and now everything is falling apart. Van Helsing! This is when the vampires reveal themselves. But it's also the moment that Carl finally gets to use his sunlight grenade. He sets it off just in time, and Van Helsing, Anna, and Carl jump out the window as the entire room gets blasted with artificial sunlight. Every vampire inside is wiped out instantly. However, Igor does escape with Frankenstein's monster before they can do anything about it. And just like that, Dracula has the one thing that he needed the most. But things get even worse, because the werewolf curse is now affecting Van Helsing, and you can see the anger seething out of him as the transformation takes over. They head back to Castle Frankenstein, but Dracula's already cleared it out. The machines, the equipment, the monster, everything, they've been moved to his real castle. The problem is, nobody knows where that castle actually is. That hidden castle goes all the way back to Dracula's father, Valerius the Elder. After Dracula made a deal with the devil and came back from hell as something unnatural, his father could not bring himself to kill him, so instead he trapped him inside of an icy fortress that could only be reached through an enchanted mirror. Talk about grounding your son. The issue is that Dracula was already beyond normal human punishment. The devil gave him wings, a monstrous second form, and the ability to leave that prison whenever he felt like it, so he didn't really stop Dracula or put him in timeout. He just created a family curse that every generation after him would have to suffer through. The Valerius family had spent 400 years looking for Dracula's hidden fortress. The worst part is that the answer was sitting right in front of them this entire time. King Boris spent years staring at that map in the family tower, trying to solve it like it was pointing somewhere outside of the castle. But Van Helsing realizes that the map is the door. The parchment that the cardinal gave him makes sense too. In the name of God, open this door. It was never actually a clue, it was the command. And so he says the words, and the map changes into a mirror gateway that leads straight to Dracula's castle. Centuries of searching, and now the Valerius family stands before the entrance. Heading inside of the massive fortress made of ice and stone, the place feels completely unreal. Also, Van Helsing's transformation is getting worse. He bends thick iron bars with his bare hands and he barely even notices this. They run into Igor, and he is shocked that they're there right now. Further inside, Frankenstein's monster is being carried towards the tower, frozen and helpless, and even then he still manages to call out to them. He tells them that there is a cure for the werewolf curse inside the castle and that Dracula has it. So Anna was right to keep hope for her brother. But Carl would realize what all this actually means. The painting said that only a werewolf could kill Dracula. Normally, werewolves are under Dracula's control, but if one of them ever turned against him, then Dracula would need a way to take that power away before it could kill him. That is why the cure exists. It was Dracula's insurance policy.
Yes, we will try again.
Helsing strongly encourages Igor to take Anna and Carl to get the antidote. Then he gives Carl a silver stake and tells him exactly what to do. That if the cure doesn't reach him before the stroke of midnight, Carl needs to kill him. Helsing knows what's coming, and he doesn't waste time pretending that he can control it or that everything is going to go his way. Once Anna and Carl are sent after the cure, he goes after Dracula alone. As expected, Igor betrays them immediately. The second that Anna and Carl reach the room, he locks them inside, and Alira arrives to finish them off. Using acid to burn through the door, Carl grabs the antidote. Meanwhile, Anna fights and distracts Alira, eventually driving a stake through her heart, killing her. With that, Dracula is left alone. But at the same time, his experiment reaches the final stage. Lightning hits Frankenstein's monster and channels through the castle, bringing thousands of Dracula's children to life. And then, a second bolt of lightning hits, sending the monster flying off the tower, but he manages to survive by grabbing onto the edge. Pulling himself up, going down, he kills Igor on the way. Everything is crashing together, and then midnight hits. Van Helsing fully transforms into a werewolf. Dracula had no idea that he had been bitten, so for the first time, he is actually caught off guard. The fight turns brutal, and Dracula would try to escape, but because the lab is too tight, werewolf Van Helsing would just drag him back down and even bite into him. And this is something that his body can't shrug off. Dracula had spent centuries acting untouchable, and now he's touched. Van Helsing has made him bleed. The immortal made mortal. For a moment, the clouds move across the moon, and Van Helsing turns back into his human form. Dracula immediately uses that pause to beg for his life. He talks about wanting his bloodline to survive, asking Van Helsing to return his ring, and then he offers him the one thing that he knows that Van Helsing would want the most: his memories, his past, the truth about who he used to be before the church turned him into a weapon. Helsing looks at him, but he basically decides that he doesn't need it, because some things are better left forgotten. And that is when the moon comes back out and the curse takes over again. Helsing rips into Dracula's throat, and the venom works instantly. Dracula's body starts to shrivel, crumble, and fall apart until there is nothing left of him. The second that Dracula dies, all of his children die with him. If Dracula dies, everything born from him dies as well. But then, Anna comes with the antidote. However, because he's still trapped in his werewolf form, he doesn't recognize her, so he attacks and fatally wounds her. Carl rushes in with the silver stake, ready to do what Helsing asked him to do. But then the werewolf just stops. Anna already injected him with the cure right before he attacked her. She saved him, but ends up dying in his arms for it. All that's left for him to do is to give Anna the funeral that she asked for, burning her body in a pyre by the sea. As the flames rise, he looks up and sees her face in the sky. The clouds open and Anna is reunited with her family. King Boris, her brother, generations of Valerius ancestors waiting for her. After 400 years, the Valerius bloodline is finally free. Promise is fulfilled, Dracula dead, curse lifted, Anna's family can finally enter heaven. It is a bitter-sweet ending because Anna wins, but she never gets to live in the world she helped save. With Frankenstein's monster, he just quietly leaves, sailing away, free from Dracula, the Vatican, anybody who wanted to use him as a weapon. The church did order Van Helsing to kill him because they refused to see him as human, but Van Helsing refused them.